Welcome to Well Good Movies, the podcast that gives you the movies well worth watching, even if there are some duds along the way. Combining questions, trivia, and games, every episode we're challenged to watch a piece of film history to decide whether it deserves to be remembered for all time in our movie vault. With every film chosen in our previous episode, it's the perfect way to watch and discuss along at home. But don't just take my word for it. Here's a snippet of what to expect in today's episode.
Me.
Jamie?
Alien.
Oh,
yes!
Come
Wow.
on! Son
That
of
is
a...
my favourite one.
I was like, did my mic just go? Like,
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Are you not entertained?
I'll be back. Here's Johnny. You're a wizard, Harry.
They call me Mr. Tibbs.
And beyond. You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off.
Well, good movies.
Hello and welcome to Well Good Movies, the podcast that gives you the movies well worth watching, even if there are some bumps along the way. I'm your host, David Osger, and I'm joined by someone who is often the narrator of our stories here on Well Good Movies, Craig MacDonald. Hello, Craig.
He gazed into the camera lovingly, as if to say, please don't hit me, Craig. Craig looked back in dismay and thought, no.
I thought you were like describing what you were doing.
No.
But then you said, hoping that Craig wouldn't hit him. I was like, oh, right, he's not talking about himself.
I mean, that could have been a conversation in the mirror. I mean, like, if we want to go psychological on this episode, sure. I'm not sure if the Paddington episode is where we necessarily want to delve into my psyche, but yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah, Craig is Homelander.
Oh, God.
Yeah, funny we were mentioning stories and tales, because I'm sure you got quite the tale of how you attempted to get to today's episode.
Yeah.
Wasn't sure if we'd get you today or not.
Yeah, so I was meant to be with you in Chepstow for this episode because you are kindly taking me to the airport later so I can fly out to Croatia for my holiday. Unfortunately, and I don't know if we want to have a policy of, not necessarily bad-mouthing companies, but I'm going to waive it for this episode to say, National Express, I booked a bus with you that didn't exist. Why did you sell me a bus ticket and then covertly go, by the way, this is for yesterday? And then I only find out when I turn up at the bus stop today, having to carry like several heavy bags, including an entire crate worth of Ribena, just so I then have to come home to record this episode remotely, and then I'm going to have to drive to Chepstow later so that David can take me to the airport still. For those saying, why don't I drive myself to the airport now that I have to use the car, bite me.
And we should also say solidarity with transport workers at the moment, despite this. I'm sure, that was
transport
nothing to do with this
workers,
situation.
fine. The company National Express, suck it.
And also, Craig, on a bit of a sadder note, we're talking about stories and we're talking about a children's property today. And sadly, the man who helped give us the Wombles, Bernard Cribbins, has passed away, who we were only talking about recently in Frenzy.
Yeah, so, God, this feels like such a mood whiplash. Yeah, no, it was a genuine heartbreak, and especially as you said to me as well, but considering that he was rumored to be involved in the upcoming sort of anniversary for Doctor Who as well as the lovable Wilf. This is such a big blow, and just and it was a sucky way to start the day, to be honest. Especially considering that just like in all of the properties that I've seen him in, I've deeply enjoyed his work. Even in Frenzy, as much as I did not like that film, I enjoyed his character and just listening to him say things that I never thought a guy like that would say. But yeah, he's a great man and he will be missed.
Yeah, and obviously we often, like to bring up actors when, they're sadly taken away from us, ones that we, have a big part of our movie watching and television experiences. But it's worth pointing out as well, this has come just after David Warner Paul Savino, which a lot of people have been talking about as well. So I know we don't always get to mention a lot of the fantastic actors and people in the industry that, sadly pass away. But it did seem, fitting to mention them as well. Also, another one which I had seen was Shankar Dakura, who was actually somebody who was just in the Elvis movie, which was one of the singers, like her debut role after being in things like the performing arts and singing industry for quite a long time. And then, tragically passed away just after that as release. So, there's been quite a few sad passings recently, and we'll miss them all. Editing Dave here, just to also add to this tribute, Nichelle Nichols of Star Trek, who sadly passed away since recording this episode, and Olivia Newton-John, which just happened today. So definitely two amazing women who are also thought of highly and are remembered in this tribute. But, today we're going to be carrying on discussing all of the films that have been suggested to us up till now. So, Craig, as we alluded to there at the beginning, we talk about movies well worth watching, despite bumps along the way. So just to tease the audience at home, do you think today's movie is a bump in the road or well worth watching?
As much as I feel like I am a jaded adult, I've got to say I do think this film is worth watching. Even if my original viewing experience, which I think David is going to potentially bring up later, might not have been the ideal way of introducing me to this film.
I think our previous guest, Niall, would just ring in and and ask you to tell that story, even if I didn't. But yes, I'm sure we will get to that. And I'm sure many people, if you didn't say that, Craig, would be hunting you down. But for anybody who didn't catch our last episode, Craig, can you just recap us on what we're watching and what led us to talk about this film today?
Yeah, so in a rare turn of events, we had our very first instance of the winner of the Endgame actually choosing to watch the film suggested by the losing participant. So, in an Endgame all about see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, talking specifically about deaf, mute and blind characters within movies, Katie came out on top and decided to opt for the choices brought by Reese, which ended up being Paddington and Paddington 2. So for those who are unaware, because this episode will be happening before our month break, just so that we can recharge our batteries, go and enjoy our summer holidays, etc., we decided that we wanted to have a film and its sequel. So the next episode, which will be introducing us back from the break, will be Paddington 2. But for this week, we will be discussing Paddington.
Indeed, we shall. We should be talking about Paddington from 2014 and undertaking our usual task of deciding whether it goes into our movie vault, our vault of movies that celebrates chosen films for all time. So yeah, it's going to be an exciting one, and we'll soon find out what myself and our guests think of this film, along with Craig. But before we get to that discussion, let's introduce our two guests today. The first joined us all the way back at the start of the year as we kicked off this chain of movies. It's film director Rob Ayling. Hello, Rob.
Hello. Thank you for having me back.
I'm surprised you didn't say hello there.
Hello there. Yes, no. I feel like we were all kind of Star Wars'd out at the moment. Wait until next year when we get to Celebration. Like, everybody will be saying, hello there, hello there,
Very true.
Hello there.
But then you did have that interaction with that dog the other day, which I found hilarious.
Oh, that was remarkable. I mean, it was, as you said, it was quite possibly quite fitting for this in a way. Probably the most British thing that I've ever done. To see a dog's head poking through a cat flap and barking at me, and I just simply say hello there and walk along, move along. So
and it's just the way but it's just like it's a typical dog in a house kind of whoa. It's not aggressive. It's not they're like kind of I don't trust you, and then you probably would walk up to them and they'd be fine.
It was either that or his way of saying help. Because his head was fully stuck in that cat flap as well. Like,
I think it was more, this is my seeing window, I hope to think. And like, this is where I see the potential,
Get off my lawn.
Yeah, where I see the postman, etc. So, and also last time, you did the time you were so like, oh, hello, David. So,
hi, David.
So you can just have a chain of different movie greetings every time you come on, if you want to.
Oh, I'll try and remember to do that for next time. I'm just trying to think what I could do for next time. I'll have a think.
It's funny you actually said about that was the most British thing I'd ever seen. Potentially since Rob, I might have challenged that now, in which earlier today I was at a works barbecue party thing for somebody's birthday, and after I left, my colleague sent me this photo, which is like, this is where it's descended to, and it's a picture of like our like lady who does the accounts holding a tortoise while looked at by two of my colleagues, one of them wearing one of those t-shirts in which it's like ripped, but instead of having like abs, he has like female like boobs. And then in the background is like this very nice looking British garden and two people doing karaoke. And everyone else is holding like wine glasses and stuff like that. So very British scene right there. But Rob, you've also been busy. I don't know if you've been to many barbecues, but you've been breaking records. You've been doing all sorts. So what have you been up to?
That's the funniest thing I've ever heard. Yeah, you've been breaking records. Yeah, casually breaking records. I mean, sort of, but not entirely false at the same time.
Helping to break records.
Helping to break, exactly. Yeah. No, I've been insanely busy, I think is probably the best way of putting it. I've been working on my feature debut, but I've also been working on other projects here and there as well. New short film, new screenplay that I've written. Despite me saying I wouldn't do one again, I ended up writing a new Batman screenplay, which is now doing the works in the festival circuit, which is really cool. But yeah, as you were referring to with the quote-unquote record breaking, I made my feature directing debut this year with The Impact, which is a sci-fi fantasy drama film involving over 40 screenwriters and over 30 directors, and I am one of the 30 directors, and we have broken the world record for the amount of screenwriters and directors involved in a feature film. So I am technically a world record holder, which is such a bizarre thing to say, and is definitely going on my business card once I get new business cards.
Congratulations.
And yeah, thank you very much. And then the only other thing that's happening, which is kind of exciting, is me directing Rope. Patrick Hamilton's Rope, which of course was infamously brought to the screen by Alfred Hitchcock. So, it's all very, very busy time for me. And yeah, that's with the Horse's Head Theatre, and we perform in October. So love it for you guys to come down as well to have a watch.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, we've delved into Hitchcock recently as well, so it was nicely timed in that, and it would definitely, again, as evident in the film's history, etc., be very interesting to see on stage, see what Rob does. I don't know if you can give us any teasers or anything like that, but yeah, we look forward to it.
I'll take it. I want to take it to a new level where you're playing with the expectations of what's already there for the audience, because it's quite a well-known play as it is. And of course, many people know the Hitchcock movie. Although, funny enough, I know a lot of people that haven't seen the Hitchcock film, which I think is a really decent film, actually, if I'm honest. But yeah, I like to think I'm going to bring another level of gravitas, definitely more colour to the screen, to the stage, sorry. And yeah, bring some modern philosophy to the stage is a good way of putting it.
I just want to see how you replicate Hitchcock's technique of randomly zoom into object and then zoom out again to transfer over the film reel.
Well, I got an easy answer for that. You just put a door in the background with a cat flap and have a dog pop through that's modern adaptation right there. Came full circle. So yeah, well, thank you for joining us today, Rob. We look forward to discussing Paddington with you later on, and I find it quite funny how, like last time, and potentially through the progress of this year, we're like, oh, we'll have Rob back, award-winning filmmaker, potentially talking about award-winning films, and then it's like, no, it's all about Paddington. Also joining us today is another new guest on the podcast, making his debut. He is a filmmaker also, and also a lecturer, as well as many other talents. It is Jamie Milligan. Hello, Jamie.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
No
Long-time
problem.
listener, first-time caller.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having me, especially to be on to talk about Paddington, which is super, super exciting.
And another one of those like great coincidences, which we've had so many times, in which like I've said to the upcoming guests, like, oh, we're talking about this. They're like, I love that film. This is my favorite, etc. And then you had a Paddington cover photo on Twitter, so it was meant to be.
Yeah, based on the guy who is photoshopping Paddington into a whole range of films. So I have currently it's Once Upon a Time in the West, but I've also had the final shot from Seventh Seal, which is like the most powerful shot in cinema for me. And then just having Paddington holding hands with them is just chef's kiss. Really, really great. So yeah, so this is exciting.
I'm always amazed like how seamlessly he's able to add him in. Sometimes it's not even just like, oh, he just doesn't look like he belongs there. Often you are like, was that in the film? Yeah, it looks so, accurate to actually the scene. He fits well. But in terms of yourself, Jamie, just tell us about yourself. What is it you do? What are your sort of links to the world of film? And what led, you've obviously done podcasting yourself as well. So just tell us a bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a bit of a lapsed podcaster. I started my podcast, The Work Experience one, after being slightly high after an operation and talking to a nurse who said that she retrained at the age of 40. And I thought, flipping heck, yeah, I can do that. So went home, signed up to Open University, and the morphine wore off. And I thought, no, I'll do a podcast. That will help the world even more than an extra nurse. So then started doing that and just talking to people about their jobs, because when we get to a certain age, we can't really do work experience. We kind of have to quit our job and start again. And it's quite scary. So just having people come on and talk about how they got into it and what a day-to-day is, it was really interesting kind of doing it. And people are always really happy to talk about their jobs, even when they don't think that they'd be good on a podcast. And then, like Rob, filmmaker as well. And I teach film and animation down in Bournemouth. And just working on trying to get my first feature made. Just not a Guinness World Record holder though. That's the thing. So I need to now do a film with 31 directors and 41 writers. Maybe that's the just out of spite, almost. I guess I could
say. There's connections forming here. Maybe Rob will return, break another record. Maybe maybe you can talk about his work experience at the same time. It can all come together after this podcast.
Perfect. Well, it's nice to get the microphone out of the cupboard. So just getting the dust off it now.
Yeah. And obviously everyone at home, go check out the Work Experience podcast. But in terms of your sort of links to film and, what sort of genres, are there any particular ones that you sort of prefer? What are some of your favorite films? Are there any types of films or any sort of like areas of the industry you prefer to chat about?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a broad church. Like I'll watch just anything, because I think with filmmaking, watching stuff is learning, and you're kind of finding all these new bits. And again, it's what I tell the students, like, you got to watch stuff to make you good filmmakers. And then weirdly, they started following me on Letterboxd, and I stupidly showed them one of my short films, and then they went on there and rated it, which was nice, which is quite exciting. 2.5 stars or 3.5. Which was the weirdest situation. But like for me, like the last couple of films I've watched, went to see Elvis at the cinema, which was great. Then I watched The Happening on Mubi, and then Bergman Island last night as well. So Happening in Bergman Island are really my kind of cups of tea, like moving towards being more of a drama director. And my latest short is trying to get onto the festival circuit now, which is a kind of chamber piece of siblings. So it's kind of just finding those. And like favorite film wise, it's always going to be like In Bruges or Lawrence of Arabia, Midnight Cowboy, those kind of ones are like. And yeah, I just love talking about films. It's just really exciting to talk about one of my favorite films as well today. So
definitely far from Lawrence of Arabia and In Bruges, but like you said, it's worthy of the same kind of accolades, I think a lot of people would say. So yeah, awesome. Thank you for coming on, Jamie, and we look forward to discussing more with you throughout the episode. So let's go now to our main discussion today, which is all about Paddington from 2014, directed by Paul King, The film is described as a young Peruvian bear travels to London in search of a home. Finding himself lost and alone at Paddington Station, he meets the kindly Brown family who offer him a temporary haven. So we got obviously a great cast here in terms of like British stars, in terms of like your bigger actors. You got Imelda Staunton, you got Michael Gambon, Ben Whishaw, Hugh Bonneville, Sally Hawkins, and then in terms of like the younger roles, we got Madeline Harris, Samuel Jocelyn, and you also have fun appearances from the likes of Matt Lucas, Julie Walters, and of course Peter Capaldi. Jim Broadbent also makes an appearance. Apologies if there's anybody I didn't mention there, but yeah, great cast. Also, Nicole Kidman is in here. Can't include her in obviously the British talent part, but very fun as the villain. And yeah, this film has really sort of made an impact with people, probably more so since the sequel, but we will sort of focus today on the original film, especially as the sequel will be coming up in this podcast in the future. More details on that at the end of the episode, but Craig sort of alluded to it at the start there with our summer break. But yeah, I think there I mentioned, the director Paul King. We've also mentioned about like how it's from a children's story. This is from an original story which was called A Bear Called Paddington in 1958. The character was created by Michael Bond, so he sort of originated in children's literature. A lot of people might know Paddington then from books, from TV shows, etc. Yeah, just knowing him from pop culture, I guess, as well, as he's just especially become such a big British icon. We're looking at a character who has met the Queen, can we say that? But has appeared alongside the Queen. And yeah, it's just sort of become ingrained in terms of like seeing him as a part of, souvenir shops in London and all that kind of stuff. He's a big part of British symbolism, which is great as well. So I guess we'll go on first to Paul King, which I thought would be important to talk about. As I mentioned, you guys are both filmmakers, and this is in some ways quite what we are seeing quite a lot with directors in the industry today, in terms of like their backgrounds coming from television or even comedy. So I thought it would be quite, good to talk about him specifically as well first, because last time we were talking about Guillermo del Toro and how that important just his legacy and his sort of like influence have on his films. And while somebody might not think immediately of Paul King in the same way, I think when you do revisit or when you watch Paddington originally, you can just see how much of his kind of aesthetic and his sensibilities are added to that film. And I know, Jamie, you mentioned that you were a big fan of him when studying and stuff because of Bunny and the Bull. So what was your experience there with him before Paddington?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of missed The Mighty Boosh, which he directed like episodes of as well. I don't know if he directed the whole series or a lot of it, but yeah, going to see Bunny and the Bull at the cinema and that kind of handmade approach to everything, those kind of lo-fi effects, just was really appealing to me when you're trying to make films for no budget and stuff like that. And seeing where he's kind of gone onto now of just capturing imaginations with his kind of style and his approach to filmmaking has been really kind of inspiring. And yeah, Bunny and the Bull is just such a great film if people haven't seen it. So it's Simon Farnaby and Edward Hogg, these two friends who one of them passes away and the other goes on a round the world trip, I want to say, but he doesn't leave his house, so it's all recreated within the flat, and all these just really cool little crafted effects and everything. Yeah, I really implore you all to go see it. I've not seen it for quite a while, but it really made a mark on me.
And Simon Farnaby is in Paddington as well, I believe, actually, isn't he?
Yeah, and a co-writer on the second one. But we don't talk about the second one today. It's the first one.
It's like we don't talk about Bruno there. It kind of reminds me, as I said, that there's many directors, etc., which have a similar story already. If we look at some of the biggest films, we got, especially at the moment, you got Taika Waititi, which in some ways has had like a similar journey, maybe Peter Jackson almost. The Russo brothers, where they were sort of directing episodes of Community. So that's why he reminds me of that kind of same trend of directors that come from comedy and quite specific, like comedy, ones with very specific senses of humor and style. and the ways that they even directed, and I really appreciate that and respect it, because I think, having worked on like comedy stuff before, I think that there is something to say about the way that people who work on comedy kind of see the world or understand like how cinematic something could be or how a story can be told. I think even when, definitely Craig will agree with this, even when you're doing something like a sketch, there kind of has to be that, beginning, middle and end, or there needs to be some sort of progression. So I think people quite often just disregard sort of comedians, that in itself is an art and a craft to it. But yeah, people who sort of tend to direct and write that kind of stuff do tend to then do very well. Similar to, I guess, how like a lot of horror directors as well will like transition over to like blockbusters and stuff like that. So I was very interested to actually find out that like, oh wow, he did The Mighty Boosh, and he did Come Fly With Me, which I know hasn't aged all that well in terms of some of the jokes. It explained a bit more about why Matt Lucas was in this film, but I always appreciated a lot of the writing of that show and a lot of the jokes that were in there. So yeah, I'm glad that he's doing well, and the fact that he's directing Wonka as well. I was like, oh wow, I am way more interested in this film now, because as somebody who's like been hit and miss with the kind of adaptations of that book, I was kind of interested in like, oh, it's Timothée Chalamet, and I think there was production photos and they were like in the snow. I was like, okay, maybe they're kind of replicating some of the Tim Burton stuff, but okay, this is the guy I think who can tell this story. Actually, I think that's a a really genius choice. Rob, do you have any specific experience with Paul King before Paddington, or any thoughts with what I was saying there about the kind of like comedy or series directors go into bigger projects?
I will say that actually I think it's a bit of a risk in many ways to have him direct this kind of film, especially quote unquote a children's film, because his comedy, and especially the stuff he directed before. I haven't seen the film that you mentioned, by the way, but it sounds fantastic, so I'm definitely adding it to the watch list. And but yeah, things like The Mighty Boosh and Come Fly With Me, they're all quite outlandish in their own way. And then you compare this to what we have with Paddington. I know we're going to go into further detail with this, but it's quite outlandish in its own way, but it's very much a toned down kind of more children's accessibility to comedy. Let's just put it that way. It's a much more like there are some like obviously some wonderful inside gags here and there, which again we'll get into, but I would say it's actually a really brave kind of risk on
Studio Canal, is it?
I was going to say David Heyman actually, on his part, to say, do you know what, this is our guy. And clearly he was a fan of his work as well, and he thought maybe the two and two can come together. And of course it helps that David Heyman is a fairly well-known producer anyway, so if you're on board a David Heyman production, then more and more people are going to come in on board with it anyway. But I think there's a level of sensitivity which I was really surprised about that Paul King was able to bring to Paddington, and I think that was the thing that surprised me the most. And again, the sequel, which we shall not speak of yet, pushes that even further. And again, I think it's really commendable that they chose quite an unexpected choice, because I think many people, especially maybe even David Heyman, he probably would have thought, well, maybe someone like the guy who does the Harry Potter films, David Yates, someone like David Yates to come in and go, oh yeah, we'll just bring him to come in, because we're pals, kind of thing, Whereas no, I think they went with a very wise choice, I think, in the end.
Yeah, and I think that, like you said, it is a risk, because I think that we've seen that go one of two ways in the past. And I think obviously, again, talking about like bigger films and stuff, but especially with Marvel, I think some of that VFX sort of commotion that we've had recently, people have been saying about like inexperienced directors, just in terms of inexperience of working with VFX. So I guess that's some of the dangers that they have in terms of having new directors. I would say just train them up on that more, maybe help them out a bit more, but that's a different topic. But
I think with like the Marvel, sorry to jump in, but the Marvel ones, they're bringing in these indie directors who aren't action directors.
Yeah, exactly.
Then that's why the films kind of, they do great character work, and then it all kind of falls down when it has to become a smorgasbord of action. And that's not, you want someone who's like a Tony Scott directing, that would have been great, a Tony Scott Marvel film.
I think that's why it worked out with the Russos, because there was almost an element of action and stuff to the stuff they were already doing, and they kind of like understand that world a bit more. So I think, yeah, you're right, it needs to be very specific in the ones you choose. And I think that, again, you look at things like Lord and Miller, they were chucked off of Solo, and I think that you look at like Pirates of the Caribbean, there was sort of like more indie directors came in towards the end with that, and that didn't quite work out again, because it's just like you said, they're people who are concerned in story and character, but maybe just being pushed aside for what the studio wants, etc. But I think it's always impressive when that filmmaker can then still get through their vision or their style through to that project, which I think we've seen with things, people like Taika Waititi, Sam Raimi to an extent possibly.
I'd say Ryan Coogler as well.
Oh, yeah.
I think Ryan Coogler is a perfect example of being able to get his vision and trademark as well. There's that wonderful one-take sequence as well in the... I call it the James Bond scene, because it's basically the James Bond moment where they go to a casino and it all kicks off. But it's all done in one glorious take, and I just think it's really nicely done. But, you make a really good point, Jamie, about the experience of a director coming in who may not have the experience of directing action, and first of all, Tony Scott directing a Marvel movie, absolutely. I'm also holding out for George Miller to do a DC movie one day. That's another fingers crossed right there. But it can still be done. Like, you can have directors come in who haven't had that experience, and I think is it Tom Watts who directed the Spider-Man movies? Little to no experience of action direction at all, but yet was able to pull off a reasonably good set of Spider-Man movies.
I went to the Paddington exhibition at the British Library earlier this year, and you could just see how important it has been over that. It was like 58 you said it was first published or thereabouts, and how many different iterations of it, and how every generation now has a new Paddington. So like the stop motion one you were chatting about, and I remember when I was a kid there was a hand-drawn animated one as well. And now they've got the film and the Nickelodeon series, which has got Ben Whishaw as the voice of as well. So there's so many different versions in 40 years time, those kids will be using that as their kind of reference of going back and saying, oh, what gives me that nostalgia, that feeling.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. When you think of something then like Paddington, it's just very different to American kind of children's media, etc., and just how that's so specific to British culture. You definitely couldn't do that as they do with Paddington here by adapting those other kind of stories. I'm not sure if Bagpuss would translate well into a major film, but I think Paddington proves that it can be done with this character.
Well, they've tried it with Postman Pat, haven't they? Where they took him on to X Factor or something. So
I was thinking that.
I would also like to point out because for me, that sort of the show that gave me that sort of feeling was Thomas the Tank Engine. And obviously they had their sort of Hollywood adaptation, which just completely just screws with the law, and it's no longer like a little island off the coast of Britain where they send sick islands to Crewe, the finest place for engines. No, it's in a magical dimension from accessed via some weird pixie dust, and there are flowers, there are telephones, and just there's a miniature Alec Baldwin walking around for some damn reason. The other show as well that sort of made me think about this and in a sort of angry way was the Magic Roundabout, because that also had a massively animated, we're just going to turn everything off the rails, and for some reason Dougal the dog is going to be voiced by Robbie Williams. They just take what are meant to be sort of simple characters, and if you put them through a Hollywood model, just to go, right, what's the most outlandish sort of actiony thing we can get them to do, and just ignore the idea of simplistic charm. I think that's one of the reasons that I think Paddington actually does quite well, because even though the villain and their schemes are quite out there and anti what the show necessarily is, the actual vibe that everything else in the film does actually represents the spirit of Paddington quite well, including in a relatively important area that I might discuss later if it naturally comes up.
Yeah, and I think the casting as well will come up, and that why that's important, as you said, where Magic Roundabout is very jarring. And I think back to the fact that even, they did it just for the effect of like Ian McKellen does Zebedee, and I don't know if it was like Ben Kingsley or someone was Zebabad or whatever the anti-Zebedee is, and just the goofiness of all of that, it just doesn't quite work. And you need that, I think that's why I was skeptical before Paddington came out, was it's again like taking something that's so traditionally seen in like animation or stop motion, etc. And as you mentioned, Jamie, it just didn't work for Postman Pat. When I think of that show, that is definitely one that's like that kind of clangers, bagpuss kind of feel of like, just literally I can feel the like, oh my God, remember being like a kid and like just the theme song, and it's just, the toy post van and the little bushes that they're like driving past and all of that kind of thing, the little animals and stuff is so like ingrained into my brain and like my childhood. And then just to do this like generic CG kind of remake with helicopters and the X Factor for some reason, it's just, they completely lost the point of the character. And that's what I was thinking of in terms of like American versions. I don't know if they could come up with better versions than me, but definitely before Paddington, I was just getting very bad vibes of, Yogi Bear and the Smurfs and stuff, which just, again, I think that this film is almost like the anti-version of those, which is just like, you don't modernize it. You keep what is like cozy and traditional and good about that story, not go like, let's put this character in the modern world and this make them hip and funny and cool. And I just think, that's why I hated those films of what they like. And I don't know if they must have just kept making money, but they never carried on. Sometimes they would have sequels, but ultimately I think people just accepted they're like, no, these are just trash. It's just not even respecting what they originally were.
I mean, my big fear for Paddington because of that. I don't know how many people will feel about this, but my introduction to this film was literally like this sort of teaser sort of trailer, which was just the scene in the bathroom. And that, I think, gave me big vibes of just, oh no, are you just expecting this character to do too much? You're just doing the sort of like stereotypical, animal doesn't know people things and it just does things in stupid ways. So yeah, that was a rough start for expecting people to sort of be like, okay, this is what Paddington actually is.
And then it became a real kind of meme on the internet of that first full body shot of Paddington, and people putting him into horror film screen grabs, and one of him just covered in blood. And it was because there was something, again, obviously it's not Uncanny Valley with Paddington because he's not a person and he looks, but there was something about it that just looked very kind of terrifying. And I think with the original casting as well for his voice, which I think we're going to touch on later, it wouldn't, the charm maybe wouldn't have been there. And I love the original actor, but I think where they went in this direction just made it just work. But again, like, it was very kind of nerve-wracking because you could see it just going badly. But I think, like you were saying, David, where it's a different world, it's a world out of step, and I think that's why people like this film. It's not London as London actually is. It's a very romanticized point. But although that touches on one of the problems of the first film, is that there wasn't a lot of black representation in those areas, which it starts to idealize what London is in an old-fashioned kind of world, which they do address in the second film, which we do not talk about, all right, which is Paddington 2, Fight Club. There's just something very kind of romanticized about that world in London, which I think really translates globally. Yeah, it is somewhat problematic at times as well.
Speaking as a Londoner myself, it was. I remember first watching Paddington and thinking, "You're in for a rough ride, mate. If you really think it's going to be like all bells and whistles." And then there's that wonderful moment when he's off the train and everyone is just blanking him and ignoring him and rushing past him because, yeah, man, that's London life for you. But yeah, it's a very heightened reality of Britain and London, and I think, as you were referring to, it's ultimately the British charm. I think that carries it through, and I think that's what Paddington invokes the most. Is it is 50 plus years of British culture, or more than that, actually. It's, it's in a nutshell. And to see that unfold in this pop saturated film is a delight.
Yeah, what you mentioned there about like London, etc. Like, ironically, I think one of my last trips to London, which was arriving in Paddington Station, and as the train arrived, it was like this, it was like one of the last trains of the day or something. So loads of people coming off and walking down that like strip platform, and there was like a homeless person right in the middle. And I don't know how they got there, because obviously you have to go through like gates and stuff. And he might have even been holding a dog or something. But people just literally all like just creating this circle around him, just like no room, just bar that person. And I remember just thinking, wow, that just represents like London or life at the moment. Just literally like everyone just like walking around this person. Obviously, that's, a very sort of serious subject. But to talk what you were saying there, Rob, about how Paddington sort of like gets around that, is that there's also that element of addressing kind of history. There's, the child's tag element, talking about the war, people, like sort of going back to Britain's kind of like some of the strengths and the great things that we've done. It heralds back to that. I guess a lot of people love him as a kind of like immigrant story for the character. And I guess that, as we might go into later, there are those touches of then the soundtrack and like a lot of the characters who are used throughout this, which are kind of trying to like reflect that kind of part of the world in which he's coming from, in terms of like, Peru, etc. So I think that, there's good attempts made there, which obviously would be then enhanced, as you said, Jamie, in this film that almost seems as if like it's the last airbender of Hollywood, in which we're like, we don't talk about Paddington 2, but we're not talking about it just purely because we're talking about Paddington 1.
And that's the thing, like every character has their arc, whereas, like the Yogi Bear film, there wasn't really
what's
much.
The arc?
Yeah, like, so giving the actors the onus to embrace these characters, and that comes back to Paul King, writer director on this, and having the source material of Michael Bond, and you can see that they totally buy into the fact that there is a bear there, like a 3-foot bear, and when they have to describe him to the police later on in the film, and it's like, well, it's not much to go on, and it's I get it, it's just so good. All these little gags, like the bear left gag and all that, there's just so much heart to it, and I think that's the thing. And this plethora of British actors, you've got like Matt King in there, super hands playing it, but everyone plays it real, and that's what's great about it.
Can I just say, of course he had to play the thief. Of all the people he had to play, of course he's the thief in all of this. I was going to just mention like what sells it to me the most, and I think this is probably when I started to kind of fall in love with the film, was when you have him call up his home insurance cover and tell them that he's got a bear in the house for the night and how much is he covered for. I just think that's, I mean, we were talking earlier about what's the most British thing possible. I think that's probably one of the most British things I can think of, is
when
calling
he says,
up
Grizzly? Well,
Yeah.
I've not seen him in the morning. Like, so good.
I do also find it impressive just how much work that they're willing to put in terms of just creating such an elaborate setup for just a simple joke. So one of my favorite jokes is obviously the in 100 yards bear left, and just how much they had to just engineer that situation just to have that, as well as the Shakespeare exit pursued by a Paddington. What? No, Paddington. Yeah. But also, as you say, I think some of the like loving charm. Also, my favorite line of the film, I don't know why, is literally one of the first times we see Mr. Brown, Hugh Bonneville, and he's just, right, everyone keep your head down. There appears to be some sort of bear over there, and just how everyone is so nonchalant about this bear. And nobody is literally going, oh my God, we're gonna die. There's a bear on the loose. Everyone's just like, oh, bloody bear. Just
no, my favorite bit of that is he's probably trying to sell something. I was just like, it's just that to me, it kind of, that's I think what is a part of the charm. And I think what you were mentioning there, Craig, is the like, why is nobody mentioning this? It's kind of like the Muppets to me. The nobody ever is just like, oh, there's this like felt character in front of me. There's this like frog in front of me. And it's not like Who Framed Roger Rabbit or even, you know, Chip and Dale as a recent example in which it's clear that they inhabit this world and they are like thriving and everywhere. It's the fact that they're like very subtly and a part of the world. So it's almost as if Paddington is setting up the like, oh yeah, there's a bear here. We don't see any other bears or animals walking around. So it's again in the light touches that this kind of, as we were talking about with that storybook effect or that animation effect, you kind of just buy into it. You're just like, yeah, sure, because we're in this world, we're in this other dimension, etc., in which that is acceptable. And I guess it kind of speaks to our sensibilities that you were like, you know what, I would want to live in a world in which people could just nonchalantly walk past a bear and not question it or not be scared, etc. I think it kind of speaks to the, optimist in all of us kind of aspect. But yeah, that did make me laugh as well, just the way they had to like rush past him, and even just the small touches. I think that's where early on you're getting an idea of his characters, when you get, again, a very British thing, the announcement of like, please do not leave any belongings, they will be like destroyed, and then just like Paddington's response of, oh dear. Like, it's just so like subtle and just concerned. I love it.
With the lost and found above his head.
Yeah.
Also, tell me, did anyone else think that they would get to see a shot of a Weatherspoons in a kid's film? That's how many times I've been to Paddington Station. You just see that booth and I'm like, that's a Weatherspoons. Why have you taken him to a Weatherspoons?
I think if you boil it down, there is something, very post-Brexit about it. Like, it's that glimmer of hope that we want, of someone being able to come to this country and to thrive, which is, what we're told is the absolute worst that could happen. And it just came out at the right time. Is it 2014 that it came out? So when was the Brexit vote? 2015, 2016? That was when it was all starting to ramp up, and you were seeing the jokes on online after the platitudes where Paddington's having tea with the Queen, and they were saying if it was a person, they'd be deported to Rwanda. And it was, but there's just something so, Paddington is what immigration should be. It's we open our arms to people to come to this country, and that's what that film is showing, that we don't just turn people away regardless of what our government is saying. And I think that's what I really just took from the film. There's just, it's about family and just trying to fit in, and anyone can come here and make it success. They're not written off because of where they were born. Yeah, they got quite deep, but yeah, I think that's and again, like the fact that that's coming through a children's film, that's perfect. Like that's how we get these messages across, that we're not just an island. We're all sharing the same experience.
That's the thing. That's the experience of Paddington that a lot of people have had. So I've seen several speeches in the past of people actually talking about why people loving Paddington means that they should extend that love to anyone who's basically just trying to come over, and basically just, like look to improve their lives. They sort of see like Paddington and the way that he's sort of accepted eventually as sort of like a beacon of hope. And I think it's really important that we do have something like that, because obviously we just get all of these, horrific, dark depictions. Yeah, not to get too political, Craig, but just all the awful things that are said, and then you just literally have like a bear who's just, I just genuinely want a home, and I've heard good things about you people. It's enough to bring a tear to an eye, if anything. But I'm not going to do that because I'm strong. But yeah, I completely agree with you, Jamie, in that I think that is just what society should be. And this is why I said earlier, like, because I often have to have this conversation with like a lot of people about children's media. The reason I get so jaded against a lot of it is because a lot of it is just trying to peddle absolute crap ideals to me and just be like filler for children. And then you get something like Paddington, which is just, actually, we can have a sort of serious message whilst also having the sort of, whimsical stuff for the children and all of the elaborate set pieces to make them go like, ha ha ha, that was funny. And this is where I'm willing to accept those things. So people say that I'm too hard on children's films. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
Are you trying to say that the Emoji film wasn't...
keeping it British. He was trying to say that the Queen's Corgi wasn't a masterpiece.
Oh, you have dodged the actual film that I've been targeting with that comment.
Okay.
You know what I was targeting with that comment specifically.
There's just so many, actually. Do I?
No, but you know it. The episode where that really came to a head. That sort of argument.
Yeah, that's... Oh, yeah, of course, yeah. Pudsey the dog, the movie.
Of course, Pudsey the dog, the movie. Of course, Pudsey the dog, the movie.
To go back, anyway, to what you were saying there, Craig, about the importance of children's stories, it goes to what, again, we were saying with things like the Wombles and, other children's media, is the Wombles was about, like, picking up litter, and, like, keeping London tidy and stuff like that. It's... so when people are just like, oh, they're trying to put this message in there, they're trying to do this, I think that's what works about Paddington, is that there's an extra layer to it, and it's not just like, oh, it's like, to me, like something like Captain Planet was always a bit on the nose, but something like this has that duality to it, in which it doesn't actually, so a lot of people would watch it and not realize the kind of message that it's telling you. And I think that, Jamie, it is right to bring up something like Brexit, because I guess kind of at that time people were talking about how households were divided, the young and the old. And I think there's something like Paddington brings people together as well, is that those ideals of people who can appreciate, they're like, oh, they're talking about the war, and yeah, what a great country we've been. We've let people in, and they're thinking about the good aspects in that sense. But then it brings like young people in about being like, well, actually, we're not that great in terms of what we're doing. It's based on current policies, etc. But people can come together in terms of sort of having a mutual respect and just having obviously a cozy, fun time with the movie, which is, just fun and has a lot of great comedic moments in it. Rob, do you have any sort of specific memories of like first watching this, first coming across it?
Yeah, I see. This was, so we were talking earlier about examples of films where we'd be like, oh, I just don't know if this is going to work because it's, part of my childhood, or, it's part of this, that, and the other, blah, 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 blah. And I'm sad to say that I did miss this film in its cinema run, and because it was one of those films where I just thought, I'll give it a pass. I'll wait until it comes to DVD and this, and it's one of those movies now which I completely regretted not seeing in the cinema, because yet I go and watch the Pixar movies in the cinema. I will gladly go and watch a Pixar movie or any form of, kids movie, but for this one I just thought, I just don't have a good feeling about this one, and my was I wrong about this. So interesting little fact. This isn't one of the facts I'm going to read later, by the way, but I used to own a little duffel blue coat, so very similar to the Paddington coat. So when he gets his coat, like, I actually wrote on one of my notes here, when he gets the origin of the duffel coat at 45 minutes in, and I wrote in brackets, like Batman Begins, how he gets the suit on for like halfway through the movie. And that's a testament to the audience's level expectancies as well, because you expect him to just be Paddington straight away, but yet he's like, I'm not going to do a bear cry. I mean, I'll probably butcher any bear cry right now, but when he says what his name is, and Mr. Brown tries to do the same, he says, oh, that is extremely rude. I always laughed at that gag. And then, of course, you find the origin of, obviously it's Paddington, so he's at Paddington Station. But yeah, I remember when I watched it and I was just completely gobsmacked by how smart it was. Like, the first opening 10 minutes I thought was incredibly brave to show the uncle dying, and I just thought, oh, okay, so we're gonna go there, are we? Okay. Yeah, I didn't expect that it to come in within the first 10 minutes, because it's a lot to take in the first 10 minutes especially for a young audience as well, to be seeing history, this charming like black and white movie thing, and then it to be almost like the scene in what's it called? Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, with the whole breakfast, gadget thing. And again, it's part of, almost like a James Bond effect thing. You've got it like breakfast being made from this artificial like tree thing. And it's just really charming to watch. And then all of a sudden the uncle dies and you're like, yeah, that is what would happen in there. So yeah, it's pretty brutal. And again, Jamie, Craig, I completely are on board with you 100% about Paddington themed in the idea of immigrants coming to the UK. I totally buy that, and I totally see that reading, absolutely. But for me, the one line that really struck with me is, a home is more than a roof on your head. And I think that is such a beautiful thing to teach children. Because, as you mentioned, like post-Brexit and stuff, we've become we're no longer really, in many ways, a united kingdom. We're a divided kingdom. And to not be able to feel accepted is one thing, but it's more explosive now more than ever, that whole thing. And I just found it really astonishing that here's a film before let's be honest, all of it kind of went downhill, to actually have a reminder of us that, the home is what you make it to be. And I just found that really, really charming. There's also another moment which I thought was incredibly meta, and I don't know, Jamie, if you agree or not, but I just absolutely adored the moment when Paddington is watching a movie and he goes into the movie, and there's something really beautifully meta about that, the idea of you're watching a film within a film, but then he's transported into the world of this film, so it's almost bringing him back home. And again, I think it's just after you hear that line, or perhaps even before you hear that line of, our home is more than a roof on your head. And yeah, like you, Craig, I could have teared up in that moment. I just thought it was so beautifully handled.
But it comes back to film being a visual medium. And this is what we forget. If you script writing, it's like, must put in all this dialogue, all this exposition, but you just show it. You just show something so simple. And that's why it translates to every generation, because we all can just understand that. And just by seeing it, I think that's simplicity is key. It's difficult to make Paddington as it is, but those simple moments just speak so much more. I
also love how practical it is as well, because that's the thing I was astonished by as well. The fact that they're able to do both is remarkable in itself. And is it fair to say rare now that they do more practical effects? I think obviously there's, Chris Nolan is very much still on the bandwagon of making it real and doing it live in person. Obviously this is a completely different scale of movie in that regard.
We'll all have to have our bomb shelters ready for Oppenheimer when he detonates.
Absolutely.
I like to watch Christopher Nolan films on my phone, because I know it really pees him off.
No, mate, it's on the Apple Watch, mate. That's what you got to do, Apple Watch.
I guess somebody need to download the entire movie, print screen every second of it, and then just send them to me.
But yeah, I was going to say the bath tub sequence, the fact that they actually had a bathtub going down, and I just blown away by that fact. I was like, yeah, that's pretty damn good. Yeah.
Awful body double for Hugh Bonneville in that shot, though. That you'll rewatch it, freeze the frame, it looks nothing like him from behind.
But also what you guys were saying there about how you reflect those stories visually is, I would say, with the tree. I think that is a beautiful piece of imagery, and I think that, as Craig and Rob has said, about getting choked up, etc. I felt like I was like, oh, I think there's cheesy moments, like, we will protect Paddington and we'll stand by him. And I think in any other film, you would just be like, yeah, whatever, cheesy kind of thing. But because it's such a sincere and like lovable character, the way that, the character's played, and he reflects such innocence, I think that it does make those bits more emotional than it would be like in any other kind of like cheesy family movie. But I think that the tree bit actually like sort of really like got a lump in my throat, just because I was like, oh, like they're not just going, oh, the family came together, because of Paddington. They're just showing that in a very simple, reflective way, which they put into the script and the visuals as well. But I just like how that we see the petals fall away, we see it, then like flourish again. And I think that this fact you see sort of like wildlife within it, it's just really smart on like Paul King's part, especially because one of the characters is like an illustrator, etc. So it's not it doesn't just even come out of nowhere. There's a reason for that. And I think that, to go with what Craig was saying as well about the importance of messages to children, we were saying about immigration, you said there, Rob, about a home. I also took away as well the aspect of like the influence somebody can have to encourage people to be themselves. And I think, again, even though it comes across in kind of like typical ways of like, oh, the kid's going to use his chemistry set to blow open the door and all that kind of stuff, but I think that it really shines when you kind of see the house, you know, going through like the sort of dollhouse again, in which he's showing like the daughter how to speak bear, you know, so something like that. It isn't just like a lazy writing approach to it of like, oh, you know, he just helps her with a boy or like helps her with her homework. You know, it's something that's very like peculiar and weird, and like a human's just there speaking bear, but it's just, there's so much charm to it. And I think it's done in a way of, again, as we said, that these characters in other movies could be like, oh, but they've grown attached to him because he's such a lovable oaf. He's so dumb. He's so stupid, or he does the right thing. But no, but here it's genuine that he does things wrong, but it's nothing that you wouldn't expect of any other kind of like animal or somebody to a new environment. But it's just the actual emotions and vibes and, you know, feelings that Paddington carries with him that changes those characters. And makes them confident to be themselves. I think that that's a really nice story, especially again with Sally Hawkins' character, because I was watching it thinking this is really refreshing from the point of view of, again, older family movies, which would have just purely focused on Hugh Bonneville. Like, he's the one that has the problem with him. He's the one which we have to focus. He's the dad. He's the male character. I think it was really nice and lovely that she was the character who actually like gravitated towards him, brought him in, encouraged the rest of her family. And the fact that she's like an oddball character and they embrace that, they don't make fun of it as well. I really like that. You know, especially at the end where like she sort of hugs the boyfriend of like the girl. None of it is done for laughs. It's kind of done for her strengths, which I think is great.
Well, she's basically the Paddington character before Paddington comes along, right? So I've talked about on this podcast before about one of my favorite techniques of just you know, having a flat character and then it's everyone's reaction to that character. It's very clear that she, because they also have that flashback of how she was like a radical before like the baby was born, and how both of them were radicals and just, you know, the motorbike punks. But then because of his severe anxiety about making sure that being a good father and raising the kids right, it was very clear that she was then becoming sort of an oppressed spirit. And she even still tried to keep that idea of like open-mindedness and freedom, but it was very clear that just he was being stifled. So just having that secondary force basically just reinforce her as well, so that, because she also did still have a lot of influence on those characters, right? She was the one who eventually sort of got through to her daughter, and then they had that relationship where she was able to then meet the boy, and then that also the vice versa, the fact of the thing that was holding her back was just not having the image of the hero in her mind, and just because of all of that work between both Paddington being there, but also her trying to get Mr. Brown to see how good Paddington was for them as a whole. She was then able to like accept and see him as like the hero that she needed. It was all just really well done, and just like, as you say, just not ever really like forced in face. It was just all natural, and just all really well told. It was actually something that I sort of forgot about from my first viewing of the film, just how smart the actual like story structure of the film ended up actually being. I remembered certain key scenes. I remembered Nicole Kidman as a incredibly weird, jaded person from the past of, my dad didn't bring back any of you as a specimen, so now I'm just going to stuff every unique animal I can find until I'm considered like up there. It's like, okay, girl, chill.
Geographers, turn your back. that killed
it's
me.
That outlandishness, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that scene also had one of my favorite actors whose name I don't know because I just know him from a load of episodes from Mitchell and Webb.
Jeffrey Palmer. Is that who you mean?
No,
Sorry?
it's like one of the like younger guy. I think you're talking about the man who actually says "turn your back," but there's like like a younger guy, and I know exactly who Craig's on about. As soon as I saw him, I was like, oh, "It's the guy from Mitchell and Webb." Yeah, so there's so many great British actors in this.
Yeah.
I think the security guard later on, like he was in like Benidorm and stuff. The one who was like drinking it's just fun to see that.
And also some random appearances of people from the thick of it. And I always enjoy people involved in one of the like highest intensity swearing shows being involved in anything to do with kids. So not just Peter Capaldi, but also you have the guy who plays, I can't remember his surname, but Ben. He appears. I think he's like the police officer who's like, well, you're not giving us much to work on. I was just like, Ben, yay.
Yeah, there's so many great moments in this film, I think. And that's where it comes into the Britishness as well. You know, I think, you know, it's funny with like Matt Lucas, and it's that it's playing with the expectations where Matt Lucas was like, well, it was his first time in the city, so I thought you might want to like tour of London, you know, when you're thinking like, oh yeah, typical kind of looking at the landmarks, etc.
I did have to laugh and react when he said that stereotypical British thing of cheer up, mate, might never happen. I just went, I have a wife, 2 children, and a fucking bear. Of course it's happened for me. Shut up.
But also I think just even like just the smaller moments, like when Nicole Kidman's character comes in and the guards are eating biscuits, and just the fact that they're just playing like a game of like what are the ingredients, and he's like sodium conked and all this. I'm just like, this is just so mundane that I kind of love it. Jamie, have you got any other sort of like favorite moments or like great pieces of comedy?
I mean, the Simon Farnaby scene where Mr. Brown is dressed as the cleaner is again, there's a problematic element to it, but it is still very, very funny. But I think because you have to have all these laughs, but when it's the sadder moments it hits, so that where Paddington is with the Hoovers going up the thing, and it's almost a bit like with the Adventures of Tintin, the Spielberg one, where he flies through the window of the plane, his head's nearly cut off. There's a bit of like jeopardy that you could see happening, and when Paddington accepts that he's about to die, yeah, it's that's a moment that always kind of sticks out. But then when Mrs. Bird opens up when she comes out pissed and knocks and with the pigeons as well. Again, it's those payoffs. We're seeing pigeons like throughout the film, and you think of London, you think of pigeons, and just having those little, although they're not very convincing looking pigeons. I'd have liked more kind of convincing looking pigeons in the film. But again, it's just such a nice little payoff. That whole kind of scene, just, you know, where Judy's like, that's Bear. Rawr. Oh, yeah, it is great. Again, it's all that you were saying, Craig, about it being written, and it's all just tying up. And that's what great, you know, Back to the Future, every single line has a payoff to it. And I'm a big Jacques Tati fan, so you're seeing like all these kind of like moments just coming together, and it's just so well orchestrated. Yeah, it's just a master filmmaker. Or, you know, and it's not just him, it's his whole team just putting this together. It's a Herculean effort to make this coherent.
It also reminded me a lot of where we were saying about how, you know, bringing families together and stuff. And I think that's why it works on those different levels, because it reminded me almost of like pantomime or something like that, in which, you know, the villain is obviously doing very ridiculous things and the families, they all rush in towards them. But it reminded me like a theatre performance in the sense of like, you can imagine a parent saying to a child like, oh, she's got Paddington. And it's like, oh, and they know that like Paddington's going to be okay, but it's kind of like the you know, the good and evil, the like, you know, the race to get him. I could imagine a kid kind of just being enthralled by that. It's not just like, oh, and let's just have this like, you know, silly chase scene or this, you know, crazy antics. It's just that like this just very simple situation in which Paddington is in danger and children will like be distraught by that, you know, so they're engaged. It doesn't matter what the situation is. It doesn't have to be like on top of Big Ben or anything like that. It's just Paddington is in danger. You are concerned about Paddington. That, you know, that's the simplicity of it. And yeah, I did often watch this and kind of, I love the kind of cutaway gags. I think that really works. Obviously, it kind of goes back to the, you know, sketch comedy kind of like lover in me. But it works when originally when we saw the pigeons, that I actually sort of laughed again rewatching it, of like, you see a pigeon and then cut back and loads of pigeons. You're like, oh, you know, especially as a Brit, you're like, yes, this is life. That is what happens. And one of my favorites of that as well was again, I burst out laughing watching it, was the sandwich with the London Guard. You know, I forgot about that, and I was like, you know what? I don't think I'll ever look at one of those the same again and not expect a thermos to be underneath that giant hat. Especially as I think recently when we had the heat wave, we saw pictures of like people giving them water, etc., because they were so boiling hot. So I hope they didn't have a thermos under there at that time. But I'm sure they had an entire picnic ready underneath the hat for that moment. But yeah, Jamie, the potential dark moments in which you're like, oh my God, has Nicole Kidman's character just died, and she like, but no, she's fine, are the pigeons gonna like surround her and kill her, etc. It's the way it kind of like plays with your expectations or kind of potential dark comedy, but then Paul King is kind of like, no, I was only joking, I'm not gonna do that.
But you have Paddington talking to God at one point in a kid's film. It's just so, like you wouldn't see that anywhere else.
Just the subtle jokes as well. Like the last one I would mention is just, and this goes again into what we were talking about, like with immigration and stuff. It's not kind of going at it in a kind of like, oh, look how stupid, look how silly they are effect. It's the kind of like, oh, they just genuinely thought that's what it meant. That when people say about like, oh, I thought this sign meant this, I thought this food meant this. It's just so charming when Paddington gets on the escalator. And I think the image of him holding the chihuahua is quite, widely used for the film. But just the kind of like, hold dogs and then like, stand to the right, just like the way, it's just great. That's such a great visual gag.
Yeah, standing on one leg. Love it.
I
love it. I love these kind of movies where it doesn't miss a beat. It's as I said before, there's the Mary Poppins effect where it's just, utterly charming and you just don't question any of it. Even, like the really sillier bits, like Jamie, you mentioned the when Mr. Brown dresses up as a woman and, there's like, oh, you're a good looking lass, aren't you? And it's like, oh, geez. Okay, here we go. And then pinning him on his arms, like, oh, it's a prosthetic arm and, all that stuff. But then you have stuff beforehand, which is, as you've mentioned, David, the escalators gag, which, if I'm completely honest with you, I was once scared of the escalator. So I think that's just really wonderfully, portrayed in the film, and how you resolve that by carrying a dog on one leg and standing to the right. One thing that I would mention as well is, Craig, you mentioned earlier about the Sally Hawkins' performance, and I think she's an absolute delight in this film. And I think, in a nutshell, I think she is very much the Michael Bond character, the creator, as it were. It's almost self-reflectory of the creator path and how he discovered Paddington, which is kind of giving away one of my facts for later. But essentially, what we see in the film is very much how Michael Bond discovered the inspiration for Paddington. So I just think, if anything else, Mrs. Brown's character is very much a huge reflection on Michael Bond's character as a creator and as a storyteller. So I just think that's wonderful to see through Sally Hawkins' performance.
And a really nice cameo of him in the film as well.
Yes.
Again, it's better than most Stan Lee ones.
Yeah, just
It was
subtle.
just a lovely tip to the hat. Love it. Love it. I think for me, and I don't know if Jamie will agree or not, but I think there comes a point in a film, or at least in a script for me, where you have to have introduced all the key elements. So when you have Nicole Kidman's character introduced 30 minutes in, and she's only in the film for, I think, maybe a total of maybe even 20 minutes, if that, really, total screen time. I at times I forgot she was in the film. And when she is on screen, she's good. Like, she's not bad, but she's not, like, she's no Cruella de Vil, let's put it that way. And because I feel like that's one of the key inspirations for this character which she's playing. But my problem with her character within the film is the fact that she's introduced quite late into the story, because there is a lot to do within this first film, which, again, won't talk about the second, but there's a lot to set up in the first film, the world of Paddington, the world of the character of Paddington as well, and then to follow up with the antagonist for the film, it gets lost along the way. I think that, the film is Paddington for a reason. It's a Paddington movie. It's not Paddington and Nicole Kidman movie, and I forgot that she was in the film. And I don't think it also helps that they choose a cliche storyline for her to a point where you're like, I guess this within the first introduction moment, of your character. So the twist and reveal of her being who she is lost with us. I think for a child, however, it would be a huge, but I think for adults like ourselves, I mean, I say adults like ourselves, I'm dressed like someone who robbed the Forbidden Planet, but that to one side, it's a fairly predictable plot and very thin character arc for Nicole Kidman's character, which is not really a shame, but it's just something that gets slightly bogged down. Anyway, I open the floor.
I'm just surprised that they chose that kind of villain aspect for this film, whereas they could have easily chosen something which would have been much more on theme, which is like, I'm surprised they didn't have it just be some like ruthless animal control who's just like, no animals from outside, especially if they're going to be smuggled in on boats from Peru. Basically, I'm surprised it wasn't just someone like that, just so hell-bent on hunting down and just sending him away, or even just sending to some facility, as opposed to just... Because I think that would... If you had a character like that, it would have made the entire coming together and just seeing... embracing Paddington as part of the family just much more narratively poignant. Because as opposed to just... She is just trying to kill this bear. And I think even if you don't necessarily, want him as part of the family, you probably would just go, yeah, killing him's a bit much. Like, hell, even Mr. Curry, who doesn't really like this bear and just sees him as a nuisance, drew the line at, I thought you were going to send him home. Like, I don't want him dead. Like, so at that point, I'm surprised they just didn't go for that. And I think that would have been, like, probably an easier sell. Maybe a more boring sort of villain, but I think it would have actually highlighted the story. Like, Nicole Kidman it was just very clear she was just sort of just told to give, okay, we want you to just try and be like outlandishly evil with regards to this. And it's just, I'm unsure of how warranted it was.
Are you thinking Priti Patel would have been a better antagonist?
Yeah, make it real life, right? Like, I mean, also just what a way to have like people actually root, right? I mean, this is something that I, even though I've not seen it, this is something that Queen's Corgi had tried to do as well, when they were literally just, lol, we're going to make the villain Trump. Yeah, screw it. Priti Patel would have been better.
I also imagine that Priti Patel does often answer the phone to like a ferret instead of the actual phone, and mistakenly goes, oh, like maybe like a severed hand or something like that. Maybe that's, but yeah, I agree with you guys. I think that also, again, I don't like to be too, when people are talking about like, big casts and stuff like that, you don't want to be like, oh, well, who's the best actor for the job, etc. But it is a bit distracting in the sense it's like an all British cast, and it's meant to be one of those films like celebrates that, and like the Harry Potter franchise always specifically wanted to do that. And then when Fantastic Beasts come out, apart from the other problems of Johnny Depp, people were like, oh, like he stands out a bit now because he's not kind of like of that caliber of what you've had before, or sort of matching the ethnicity of the character. And I feel Nicole Kidman as a kind of like American, Australian sort of actress also doesn't quite fit into the cast in that way. And again, I'm not saying that somebody else could have made that work or maybe further down in other films, but I think because the Britishness is such a big aspect, I think they could have made that work. And what you were saying there, Craig, I think, a good solution is to kind of Shrek to it in a way, is to make the father more of the villain and actually turn around and be like, oh no, like he's set the animal control on Paddington and he's a bit more of the villain, and then he actually has to come around and, stop the force that he's started.
Okay, so take those cassettes, rewind them, and play them again, because it's VHS Corner. So this week, we asked Rob if he'd be willing to dive into some of the facts behind the film and tell us some interesting trivia about both this film and probably Paddington as a wider concept. So, Rob, take it away.
Yeah, sure. So let's start with probably the most obvious one that I think most people probably know, is that Ben Whishaw was not originally supposed to be Paddington Bear. It was Nicolas Cage. No, I'm joking. Although, could you imagine? Oh my God. No, it would have been horrendous, obviously. Colin Firth was originally cast as Paddington, but was then replaced by Ben Whishaw. And quote unquote, he was much too handsome and an older voice to be Paddington, which I kind of agree. So that's fact number one. Fact number two, probably no surprise. Marmalade and orange sales went up to due to the success of this film. And it was also the most Googled recipe in 2014. How to make your own marmalade. Who would have thought? I'm surprised we didn't even mention that in most of our discussion about the marmalade sandwiches and keeping it in your hat and always having an important one for the occasion. Did you know that there was a writer involved, an Academy Award writer involved in this, but they did a once-over of the script? Emma Thompson did a once-over of the script, and that's why she has a special thanks in the credits. So she looked over and just was like, yeah, this is British enough, we will move forward with this. I imagine is what she probably said. I'm paraphrasing, obviously. So, Nicole Kidman. We've brought her up quite a few times already. She is a huge fan of Michael Bond's books, particularly one called Paddington Bear, or A Bear Called Paddington. And she also learnt taxidermy and knife throwing for the role in this film. However, all of those scenes in which she shows that off were cut because they were deemed too serious for a kids' movie, which I could totally imagine. Although that one moment where she throws the knife on her dad's face is kind of... was it on her dad's face or was it on the bear? I can't remember. It was one of those ones. I was about to say they all look alike, though they don't. Right. There was once a controversy with Paddington, where Paddington fans were outraged by a particular advert. Does anyone want to guess why that was?
Was he advertising Marmite?
You are correct. He was. He was advertising Marmite instead of marmalade, and Paddington fans were like, this is an outrage. We want our Paddingtons to be eating marmalade, not Marmite. It is unacceptable. But alas, money came through and, royalties and all that stuff came through. So money talks. So that bear eats Marmite for the dollar. So there you go. There is also an interesting history with Jeremy Clarkson and his family. Now, according to this connection, his family were the ones that manufactured the bears of Paddington. And so he actually owns one of the first original manufactured bears of Paddington. So that's Jeremy Clarkson. And I believe it's his aunt who was part of the factory as well. Last but not least, we mentioned the man already, and I mentioned kind of the fact already as well, but Michael Bond, a former BBC camera operator for BBC's Blue Peter, discovered a bear in a toy shop inside Selfridges, and he gave it to his wife for Christmas. It was just one standalone bear, all on its own, literally the only one left on the shelf. He got it for his wife for Christmas, but was so inspired by the fact that he found this very lost, soulless bear on the shelf that he then decided to put pen to paper and created a story about an immigrant bear comes to UK. A Bear Called Paddington. Those are the facts.
Great facts, Rob. I think just go back to Colin Firth, where, it'd be interesting to hear what his voice track was, because they had recorded quite a lot of it, I think. And it was just sounding too 50-year-old man. And it would be really interesting just to kind of do a side-by-side and see how different the tone is.
Yeah, that was one of the things that sort of gave me faith about the project originally, though. I was like, okay, they understand this again. It's not like... I thought about this when watching the film. Just sorry to, put this nightmare in your minds, but imagine if James Corden had voiced Paddington.
Good Lord.
This is, I was just thinking of how this could have gone wrong. And
I mean, it did happen. It's called Peter Rabbit.
Oh, true, yeah. Well, so in the sense of, or even like an American actor or something like that, when I was looking at this on IMDb, it came up with, IMDb shows or something, and Freddie Highmore was there, and I was just like, they could have easily done something like that, being like, oh yeah, this child actor, or or older young actor, which they could have had. But I think it was best to sort of keep it British, and I think that it's shown as well in the sense that Ben Whishaw has gone on to kind of play similar roles that he was in Mary Poppins Returns, And yeah, he just has such like a charm and sincerity to him. I think he did end up being perfect for the role, especially, you know, I always loved him as soon as he was like Q in the Bond films. So I think that, you know, that was a really good choice. As far as the Marmite thing, I can't even imagine Paddington would like Marmite. So I think that's what was the mistake in that marketing choice there. So, yeah, well, awesome facts there. Thank you, Rob. And yeah, all adds to the legacy and interesting elements of this film. So that brings us on to our final part, which is just wrapping up our discussion of the film and asking, does Paddington deserve to be remembered for all time and gain the honour of a place in our movie vault? So for anybody who's trying to sort of think about, you know, what is the purpose of the vault? I guess you can see it in a world in which possibly these films might all exist in the future, but it's kind of like a time capsule. If somebody used to dig this up and you wanted to teach people about good and bad films, you know, should Paddington be there to sort of represent an era or element of cinema? Jamie, I guess by your admission that you think this is a perfect film, I guess I can guess your answer, but
so no. Yeah, so please put it in.
Rob, do you have any opinions on the film that will not be mentioned? Is this going to kind of go down, oh, well, we've already admitted there's potentially a better, you know, sequel? Or do you think it's like, oh, well, that one is so loved that you need to complete the duo? Or because you had, I suppose, problems with the film. Does that make it go down enough that it doesn't deserve its place? What do you think?
Dude, why are you trying to create a comparison with a film that we, by our own admission, aren't allowed to talk about yet?
I'm only referring to your expectation of these films, whether they go in the vault, to be fair, Craig.
I have long said I'm happy to just put films in I like. It is you who's just like, oh no, they have to represent a...
No,
they have to
but
represent
you
something.
You did say last week after, or like last time after the record, you were like, I think
yeah,
the first
off
one
the
might
record,
not go.
David.
Well, I was trying to be coy about it, but yes, Rob, your thoughts?
Yeah, I will accept the first thing that you said, which is the duo thing. You know, you have to have, you can't have one without the other, in my opinion. And you know, we will discuss later about said film, but I think this is, as we mentioned a few times already, it's like the Mary Poppins effect. It's, you know, it's practically perfect in every way. You know, it's always nice to have a spoonful of sugar to let the medicine go down, and this is the epitome of it. And it's what I love about this particular film, which I didn't realize until I watched it. Maybe now this is probably the fifth time I've watched it, because it's become like a one of one of the two films in question that we watch at Christmas now. We either go for the first, or we go for a second, or we go for something else entirely, you know, because this can be classified as a Christmas movie, because towards the end, of course. But the attention to detail that this film has is really astonishing, and we've mentioned this earlier, like, it doesn't miss a beat in terms of its story or its comedic beats, you know, and I think craft for film and filmmaking and storytelling has to be commended, and it has to be preserved. So, yeah, this film has to be in the vault for that reason alone.
And Craig, I suppose you've already potentially given away your feelings previously. But,
No, I haven't. You are misquoting me off the record, David.
No, not the off the record thing. I'm on about like your rant before Rob's mentioning, but yeah.
Look, when it comes to kids' films, I just ask myself a simple question. Would I actively encourage any children that I have to watch this film? And the answer is yes, at which point I think it needs to go in the vault.
Awesome. Well, yeah, and I think to not go with, you know, what we were saying about like representing certain things or certain eras, I would also say, you know, similar to what Rob said in terms of like, it is nice to keep the set together, but also I think that there would be films out there in which you could make that case. Something that I think there's probably better examples, but my example in my mind is something like the old Addams Family films. As great as they are, you could still enjoy family values for the same elements that the first film works. And, you know, you don't need that first film. You understand what the Addams Family are. And I think the same could be said with Paddington. You understand what Paddington is. But I think that this film does such a great job of kind of like, as you said, Rob, also like the Batman-esque of like, you know, here's the coat, here's the hat. And add in such weight and emotion to that you need it there for the story purpose, but also just about, like, as we said, and as Craig said, is about teaching children these important lessons and how they can carry that through to the next film, but also in terms of filmmaking for Paul King as well, that you can see what, you know, he's kind of experimenting with here and his strengths as a filmmaker and the beautiful imagery he's able to do. So I think that, yeah, for that alone, I think it's worthy of going into the vault. So as we all are unanimous, into the vault goes Paddington from 2014. If you haven't checked out Paddington yet, go check it out. I didn't mention it last episode, but it is on like every streaming service there is. So it is a very accessible film. I think Studio Canal wants you to see this film. It's on all of the streaming services, all the major ones anyway. Yeah, let us know if there's any films that you would want to see discussed in the future. Or if you disagree, if you've got a controversial thought on Paddington, let us know. And obviously we'll be discussing the sequel in the future. More about that at the end of the episode. But now, let's go to our final part, which is our Endgame.
We're in the Endgame now.
It's so annoying.
Okay, Endgame time. This is a game simply called And the Story Goes On. Because we've alluded to several times throughout this episode that there is a much more successful and popular sequel to this film. And they got me thinking that what I'd like to do is sort of like the bridge between this episode and the next episode is an Endgame all about sequels. So what I've done is I've taken the name of various films which are sequels to another film. And basically I've removed any reference to the first film. Right? So for example, if I were to give you the word Maverick, the original film you're looking for is
Hot Shots.
Or Top Gun. Yeah. So basically that's what I've done. So basically I've removed any reference of the original film title that might be in the sequel title. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you those titles, and I want you in quick-fire succession to basically say what the film is. Basically, the way this will work is this. I want you to basically, as your buzzer, just say me. So, Rob, let's test your buzzer.
Me. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Jamie?
Me.
Okay. They sound slightly similar, so...
I can do moi.
Oh,
Okay,
I could do a meh.
Do it. Rob could do it in a London way. You know, we're talking about London being such. You know, he's a Londoner, mate.
mate.
Okay. I mean, whatever at this point. Okay, so the prize you're going to be playing for is going to be a little bit different this time. So we've, in previous episodes, have been playing for the opportunity to choose what the episode, what the next episode will be focused on. Obviously, we know what that's going to be. We know it's going to be Paddington 2, so we can stop talking about it in some like weird, coded, horrific way of keep this out of our mouths. So instead, what you'll be playing for is the opportunity to add a film to our sort of potluck collection. So for those at home who have never heard about this, as I never heard about it until we came up to this episode, David has been collating the films of various guests who did not get their opportunity to have it discussed because they lost their end games, or they didn't get their films, or they didn't choose their own films, for example. And there are going to be times in the future where we might have episodes where we basically dip into the potluck and pull out some films. This will be your opportunity to add films to that list. We'll find out what you want to choose once we know the winner of this game. So, Rob and Jamie, are you ready?
Meh. Yes.
Oh, it's going to be one of those games.
Yes.
Okay, and David, if you can please keep the score. Oh, also, important caveat. Some of these titles will also meant to have 2 in them. I've removed the 2. I've removed the numbers. Because otherwise, I could easily get away with just going, question 6, 2. Right? Okay. So, number 1. The Quickening. Oh. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's our first timeout. David, do you remember this? Because this was in one of the Endgame specials.
It does ring a bell.
This is notoriously one of
Highlander or something?
It is indeed.
Oh, Highlander.
Oh.
Yeah, it's notoriously one of the worst sequels ever made.
Right.
Apparently. So it's Highlander 2: The Quickening. Question 2. Breaks the internet.
Wreck-It Ralph. Oh, Jamie.
Ah.
Or neither of those things is the thing I said, but did Jamie get it right? Yeah, it's Wreck-It Ralph.
Oh, sorry, the adrenaline just went through.
No,
me.
fair play. Fair play. You got there.
Okay. Number 3, but for some reason my notes has changed it to 4. I don't know why. 2049.
Meh.
Rob.
Blade Runner.
It's indeed Blade Runner.
It's frustrating, isn't it, when you're not the quickest.
Yeah.
That will happen a lot during this game. Okay, number 4. Son of.
Oh.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's a timeout. David?
No.
The Mask?
Son of the Mask.
God damn it! I
Son
knew
of a
it.
bitch.
I was trying to think of it, what it was. Oh, that's
Another
annoying.
sequel which is incredibly awful.
It is the worst.
Is that
Number
with
5.
it's Alan Cumming, is it?
Yeah.
Yes,
I was thinking
as
that.
Loki.
Yeah. Oh God, that's a bad film.
Number 5. Beyond Thunderdome.
Jamie, yes, me. Mad Max. Jesus, why can't I do that?
I want to see that like on Pointless or something. Like, Jamie, me, oh, you.
It's a good thing I'm not. It's a good thing I'm not all that strict with how I want this off. Okay, next up. Live Free or
Meh. Die Hard.
Live Free or Die Hard.
I saw that in the cinema. Completely regretted it. Oof.
Ironically, that was on the list of one of the better sequels.
Oh really? Oof.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But then they also did compare it to A Good Day to Die Hard.
Oh
so,
God, yeah.
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 Okay.
Yippee
next
ki
up.
Mother Russia.
You made a weird sentence with that as well. It was like, meh, Die Hard.
Down Under.
Jamie, me.
Yeah.
I am Jamie.
Is it Crocodile Dundee? No, it's not, is it? I got it wrong.
What was? Sorry.
Rob, any suggestion?
Can you repeat the title? Is that all right?
Down Under.
No.
The Rescuers.
Oh,
The other
course.
Disney mouse film.
Course.
We talked about Sherlock.
Yeah.
Basil
Do
last time.
people usually do well on this game, or?
Honestly, at the point where you've scored points, you're doing better than quite a few people.
Oh,
all right.
great.
So we're good. We're good.
I'll take that.
We're good. Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
fine.
take that.
Call it a draw.
Yeah.
Okay, next up. Judgment Day.
Jamie.
Aha! Terminator.
That was indeed Terminator.
I had to get that one. That one.
Next up. Lost in San Francisco.
Oh, bollocks. Oh,
We have to accept your first answer.
That was your buzzer, wasn't it? Come on, we're waiting for the answer.
meh. No, I've got it wrong. I'm just about to guess the wrong film.
Well, something would be nice.
No, I'm going to go with...
Say it.
I can't remember the film. I actually had it on my tongue. I've lost it. No, I lost
I'm
it.
timing this out. Jamie, any idea?
I actually had it.
Lost in San Francisco. Oh, I don't know. Is it Lost in Translation too?
That's an amazing...
Homeward Bound.
That was it! I was trying to remember the dogs.
so much.
That's
You were
what-
trying to remember Chaz, Shadow.
I literally...
Yeah, Chaz and Shadow.
I saw the Golden Retriever and I thought...
Though I kind of want Lost in Translation
so do I.
to be a thing.
So do
want
I.
that,
That's
yeah,
what he
Lost
whispered in her ear at the end.
I'll meet you over there.
Are you ready for number 10? Number 10.
Me.
Jamie?
Alien.
Oh,
Yes!
come on. Son
That
of
is
a...
my favourite one.
I was like, did my mic just like go? I was like,
Yep, I thought I've literally removed all reference to the original, so I left the letter S. Well done, Jamie.
Wow.
All right, next up. Simba's Pride.
Me.
Meh.
That was Jamie.
Lion King.
Indeed.
My
Lion
hands are
King.
so sweaty. Why?
All right, next up. The Next.
Meh?
Rob?
Star Trek? Oh, damn it.
Not what I'm looking for.
The next Virgin Suicides. Stick on a Sophia Coppola trend.
David?
is it the Karate Kid?
Oh.
The Next Karate Kid.
I knew it was one of those kind of like goofy kids films they milked.
Yep. Next up. We're going back to another year. 1984.
Mare? Jamie?
Jamie?
I don't know, Red Riding.
So remind me, the answer is... Sorry, not the answer. The clue, sorry.
That was a nice way to trick me there.
Yeah.
1984.
1984. Meh. Wonder Woman.
I was like, Rob, come on.
Sorry.
I was surprised it took that long.
Sorry, to be honest with you, like, I'm trying to erase that movie from... No, I'm joking. I like that film. I'm joking.
I guess it's it's kind of a franchise in itself that the standalone. You know?
Yeah. Okay, so we've got two left. Next up. All American Girl. 5, 4, 3, 2,
Meh.
1. Oh, just in time, Rob.
I thought by doing that it might hold me a few more seconds. No, I'm gonna go. No, I do have a guess. I do. It's a terrible guess, but American Pie. Yeah, I thought so.
I was thinking the same, to be fair.
Miss Congeniality.
Oh God, is that right?
You were nowhere near, although technically with the name American Pie, you were very close. It's American Psycho.
Ah.
Oh, of course. Yeah, the one with Mila Kunis, isn't it? In the sequel, is that who it is in it? I think
It might be.
Yeah, I've heard about it. Yeah, I've heard about the film.
Okay, and now we go into the final question. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I couldn't have a sequel game without this film, but it's Electric Boogaloo.
Yes, Jamie.
Oh.
JB. Yep, go for it.
Oh no! Is it? Oh my God! Is it Juice Bigelow? No.
No.
Shit.
I literally had it on the cross of my tongue, and now I've forgotten it, which is really annoying. There are people going to be screaming at me now.
That's just in your head.
Yeah, that's just
this
my
is
mind.
why I had to include it, because this is the most memed sequel title of all time.
I would have thought Too Fast, Too Furious, but
No, honestly, it's this. Basically, I'll explain the meme later, but
I'm going to have to pass. I'm sorry. Yeah.
it's a film called Breakin'.
Right. Okay.
It's called Breaking 2.
Well, I mean, shut up. So yeah, obviously the full title is Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Right, okay.
Essentially, when people made jokes on Reddit for a while of any films that would have unnecessary sequels, they would always jokingly call those sequels like whatever to Electric Boogaloo.
I think that's why everyone was so quick to it, because they almost wanted to say some of the memes.
Yeah. Okay, so that is the end of the game. So David, what are the final scores?
So it's 4-all.
Oh!
A tie.
Oh, God.
So this is going to be fastest first.
Oh, no.
Have I prepared for this?
Mm-hmm.
No. I'm the quickest.
Oh.
Okay, no, I've got one.
Oh, okay.
This is going to literally be quickest first. The Quest for Peace.
Meh.
Rob.
Star Trek.
It's not Star Trek.
Superman.
Oh, of course!
Superman
of course
4,
it
The
is!
Quest for Peace.
Oh!
And in that stunning upset victory, Jamie has taken the win. Congratulations.
I'd like to thank
Rob, are you okay?
Mate, I'm so sorry.
Oh, do you know what I was thinking of? It was the one where...
The Journey Home was... no, Journey... That's... Yeah,
No, it's the Final Frontier when they meet God.
Right.
And you're just... Oh, God. Damn it. I can't believe I lost a film quiz to Superman 4, The Quest for Peace.
It was on the wall
God.
when Wonder Woman, when it took that long, you know, as DC was going to get
To
you.
make it worse, I've not even seen it. So if that helps.
Oh, dude, you
Is
need
that the
to
one
watch
with
it as
Richard
well.
Pryor in it?
That's the
No.
third one.
That's the third one.
Yeah, that's the third one.
Awesome, well done, Jamie. So what is your recommendation for a film that we might look at in the future when it goes to our stack of films that have been suggested but have not won? In this case, it has won.
I was thinking Werewolves Within.
Okay.
Just for something that's quite meta, very kind of knows what it is, and is just also a lot of fun. I think otherwise I would just go for something quite bleak and depressing, like Vera Drake or something. So I think Werewolves Within might be a good place to go.
Awesome. Right. Well, we hopefully plan to use our stack in the future. People will find out where this might come into play, and we might have previously recommended films that will come up. So thank you for adding that to its list, Jamie, and well done on today's win of the Endgame. But yeah, so it's been a great episode talking about Paddington. Thank you both for joining us. And yeah, Jamie, so tell us, where can the people find you, your socials, any projects you got going on? Where should the people go?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Jamie Milligan. I was the first in there. And Millie Snap on Instagram. And yeah, just writing, and hopefully get a couple of projects going later this year. Just comes down to money. So if anyone wants to give me money, I can drop my sort code and account number in the episode description. I assume that's fine to do. So come and follow me, come and find me, and thanks for having me on. It's been great.
Pleasure having you. Thank you very much for joining us. And hopefully people can go fund Lost in Translation 2, Lost in San Francisco. Rob, what about yourself? Where can the people find you? What have you been up to? What have you got coming up, which you sort of alluded to at the beginning?
So I am Rob Ayling. I'm a writer and director, and what I've got coming up right now is I have an unpublished Batman screenplay called Enigma, a Batman story, which is now doing the festival circuit run. I have just completed and have a film released called The Impact, which is a record-breaking feature film involving 30-plus directors and 40-plus screenwriters. And I will be directing my first ever play in October. It is Patrick Hamilton's Rope under the Horse's Head Theatre. I believe that is a reference to The Godfather, so yes. That will be happening in October. So you can follow me on Twitter at Rob Ayling Film or on Instagram at Rob Ayling to find out more details and see the progressions of those productions that I've just mentioned.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll go check them out. Thank you as well, Rob, for joining us. And of course, we will be returning in September now for our part 2 to this discussion, talking about Paddington 2. So probably couldn't have appeared in that Endgame. And you are both more than welcome to join us once again for that in any sort of way that you can, whether it just be sort of notes you might have about it or a message, but we'll be happy to have you back on a guest as if you do wish to speak about the film that shall not be named, as I suppose we alluded to it so many times. So you're welcome to come back to that. But yeah, for people at home, we are now going to have a summer break. This is our last episode before we go away for a few weeks and have a bit of a holiday. We've gone through a big chain of movies now for the past few months, and it's a good time for us to collect our thoughts and get back to it later in the year when we're able to have all the fun of Halloween, Christmas, November, whatever you want to allocate that as, post-Halloween, bonfire night, pre-Christmas. We've got lots of fun episodes coming up, and very fun ideas, and exciting to see where Paddington 2 will lead us, especially before Halloween. That is what I'm most anticipating. So we'll be going for a few weeks, but look around for us to come back around the 20th of September, where we'll be talking about Paddington 2. If we teased you enough there talking about this unnamed film, so if you want to know our thoughts on it, we might have kind of given it away, but as I'm sure you'll all want to sort of discuss it with us, check that out in a few weeks' time. So we hope you all have a good summer yourselves. If you do want to check out Paddington 2 in the meantime, like Paddington, it is on pretty much most streaming services. You can rent it, you can get it on 4K even. So go check it out before our discussion so you can get involved in the conversation. Craig, anything lastly from yourself, especially before our summer break?
I'm off to Croatia. See you, schmucks.
Oh no, he's lost in San Francisco. So, thank you both for joining us. And we look forward to discussing Paddington 2 next time. See you in the next one. Bye-bye. Have a good summer.
Good day to you.
To keep up with the latest episodes of Well Good Movies, you can listen to us on all your usual podcast outlets, including Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and more. Don't forget to follow us, subscribe, and rate us where you can to keep our podcast growing. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Well Good Movies to keep up with the latest news and highlights from all our episodes, as well as tell us what movies you want to be discussed in the future. And if all of that isn't enough, you can also find us at our website, freshtakehub.com/wellgoodmovies, where you can catch all our episodes along with videos and articles deep diving into the worlds of film and television. So what are you waiting for? Go check out the film we'll be discussing in next time's episode.